Today I'd like to talk about another type of dwelling from a northern climate. The one we're going to talk about today is something that the people of Mongolia have lived in for a very, very long time. Now, Mongolia is a country that is a little south of Russia and north of China. So you can see on the map where it is, and you can see where Alaska is on the map as well. So it's kind of up there in the north like we are. The Mongolians are a nomadic people, which means that they follow the animals that they live with, and they travel from place to place constantly. So they need to have a kind of shelter that they can pick up and move when they move. And what they have come up with over all the hundreds of years that they've been doing this is something that they call a gur. It's also called a yurt. And you'll probably hear the word yurt a lot here because there are a lot of modern day people, these are modern day people in Mongolia that live in yurts, but maybe I should say people in the West, which is where we live in the United States, who actually still live in yurts now. And in fact, when my husband and I were first married, before we had kids, we lived in a yurt. And I'm going to show you some pictures of our little yurt in a minute here. First, I'd like to show you a picture of a Mongolian yurt. This one is a picture taken in the summertime, but the yurts are warm even through the winter time. And inside you can see that it's quite a cozy little place. They would have a fire in the center where they did all of their cooking, and they had beds and places to sit all around the outside. And they're a very social people who love to sit in their yurts with lots of family around, telling stories and eating their food. As we go on, I want to talk about how these yurts are constructed. So the yurt has the walls are made of this lattice structure, which are boards that are kind of tied together at these cross marks, as you can see, and it makes it so that it can open and close. And I'll show you that in just a second. Right now what we're seeing is one person is kind of stretching out that lattice wall while two people are holding up the center ring that would go around in the middle. So moving to talk about the walls, you can see in this picture, this is the wall kind of scrunched up. And then as they pull it apart, it opens up. And that makes it so that they can take the walls up and put them down really fast. It only takes about a few hours to put up a yurt if you have everything all ready to go. So once they get the walls all stretched out, then they have somebody stand in the center holding the center ring while the other people fit the rafters into the ring and then into the lattice wall. So running around the top of the lattice wall is a wire that keeps the lattice wall from moving, and also as they kind of attach the lattice wall to the door, that also helps that lattice from not opening up more or closing. And the wire that runs around the top of the lattice is where those beams, those ceiling beams, sit. So here you can see there's all at once the people have to put in the ceiling rafters, those beams. They have to come at it from several sides at once so that very quickly the center ring can kind of hold itself up with less help from the people. So these people holding the ring, that ring is incredibly heavy, and so they don't want to have to hold it for long. So if they put beams on from all sides, quickly they don't have to hold on so tight. Once they've done that, then they can go ahead and put in all the rest of the beams, and it takes a lot of them to hold up the roof of the yurt. And you can see in this picture where those beams are kind of resting on the little wire that's running around. Now this yurt has windows in it. This is more of a Western yurt, what you might find people living in the United States, with windows and nice doors. And this is not really what the Mongolian yurts looked like. They don't really have windows because it's kind of tricky to do that part of it. Once you have the structure of the yurt up, it's time to put the cover on. These people are using kind of a plasticky type of cover, but we'll go back to the pictures of the Mongolians people setting up their yurt, and they would have used skins and furs and things like that. So here they are putting the cover over the roof and then putting the cover over the sides of the yurt. And we can see here, with going back to this Western style of yurt, they've put the ceiling on, the roof on, and then around the sides of the yurt, they've put this insulation. This is the kind of yurt that my husband and I built. And we had this type of insulation, and it's really actually, it's basically bubble wrap that has a shiny material on one side that sort of absorbs heat and keeps the yurt warm. And we were able to live in our yurt all through the winter even, with just that little amount of bubble wrap as insulation. So air can be quite an insulating thing in a shelter. Here we have a picture of the people kind of tucking everything in and getting the outer shell of the yurt put together. And then for their windows, they've had to actually cut through the insulation and the outer layer in order to put in their windows. And there's a picture of the inside of their yurt. So now I want to show you a couple pictures of the yurt that my husband and I built, just because I have a feeling you might be curious about it. So this is our little yurt in the middle of the winter with the snow and ice. And it was pretty cold in there, honestly, but it wasn't too bad. We have a picture of the inside of the yurt. Now, we had a lot of stuff, and so it looks pretty cluttered in here because we just had so much stuff to fit in there just to live off of. So that's kind of a picture of our kitchen and dining area. And then over here, this is a picture of my husband in our bedroom area. It was all just one room, but you're just seeing it at different angles. And you can see we've hung our clothing on that lattice structure instead of having a closet. So you have to make use of everything when you live in a tiny house. Here's our stove, which was right in the middle of the yurt, and we did all of our cooking on top of or inside of that wood stove. So that was kind of an adventure. That was pretty fun. This is a picture of the inside of a Mongolian yurt. So that's more what the traditional yurts look like inside. They are actually often quite large, some of them, and when it's time to move on to a different place, they can very quickly take these apart, pack up all the pieces, and put them into wagons that are pulled by their animals, and they can move with the herds. So that is the Mongolian yurt, or gur, as it's sometimes called. And that's a pretty fun place. Maybe someday you'll get to live in a yurt, or you can actually, yurts are often, people have them as like a bed and breakfast. So maybe you'll get to stay in a yurt someday. They're pretty popular these days, so you might have that opportunity.